Today we're going to look at the different types of planes. Now, these two are the most commonly mixed up planes. A jack plane has got a long sole and a smoothing plane has got a shorter sole. You'll also know by the numbers, this is a number 4 and this is a number 5. Okay, so our jack plane and our smoothing plane. Now our jack plane that we've got here is pretty well set up. How I know it's well set up is I look down the sole of the plane and I see how much the blade or the cutting iron protrudes by. I can adjust the cutting iron by moving it in and out using the adjusting nut or adjusting the angle using the adjusting lever. Now, whenever I have a plane, before I use it, I want to get a scrap piece of wood and put it in my bench vise. When we put things in our bench vise, we always want to make sure that it's even and square to the edge. So, 2 hands, I've got my handle at the front and my handle at the back. I hold it like this. Now I often offset my plane slightly to the side whenever I'm pushing it forward. So I just place it down and I move it forward. You know a plane is well set when you get a nice ribbon like this. Now, I did a visual check to ensure that my cutting iron was nice and flat, the angle was flat. If I wanted to do a check, I would use one side of the plane and go forward, keep that ribbon, use the other side of the plane and move forward. And I would compare the thickness of the different ribbons, okay, to make sure that it was exactly the same. This would tell me that my blade is nice and flat. For National 4 and 5 practical woodworking, we need to learn 4 different parts of the plane. The 4 different parts are the adjusting nut. The adjusting nut adjusts the height of the blade. The adjusting lever, found here, adjusts the angle of the blade. The other 2 parts that we need to learn are located in here. We have our cap iron and our cutting iron. These are joined together with this little flathead screw here. Now I'm part way through restoring this plane, so I'm going to take this opportunity just to show you how to set up a plane from scratch. So the first thing I want to do is check to see how flat the sole of my plane is. So I've just taken a Sharpie and done some lines across the plane. I'm then going to put it on 120 grit sandpaper. Now hopefully all of my lines are going to start disappearing at the same time. Okay, you can see some of the edges are disappearing first. So next up we're going to look at 2 of the parts of the plane that you need to know for National 4 and 5. So this is our cutting iron. Our cutting iron is the blade that does the actual cutting. Now we need to make sure that this is sharp and you've got a real clean edge on it. And we want to look for a nice polished finish. So when I'm setting my plane, I've always got my whetstone beside me so that I can sharpen this if I need to. And I've got this, which is called a strop. Now that's just used to deburr and to polish up our cutting iron. Then we've got our cap iron. Now these are held together with this little screw. When I'm setting my cap iron onto my cutting iron, I want about a 2mm gap the whole way along. So I'm just going to get my screw, tighten that up, and let's see what we're like. Square things off, give it a final little tighten. And again, as I said, the distance we're going for is about 2mm. There's no need to measure it, we can do this by eye. And then I'm going to set this into my plane. So it goes into the plane this way. Okay, and now we've got our mechanism that goes on top. Okay, so that's us tightened up. Now I'm going to turn my plane this way and inspect my blade, or my cutting iron. And I notice that it's too close to this edge of the mouth of the plane. So I'm going to have to do some work here so that my blade is set further back. How I do that is really simple. I'm going to take these out. Now we need to know these parts for National 4 and 5. So we've got our cap iron and our cutting iron. We don't need to know the name of this part. This is our frog. So our frog is held on with 2 little screws. And then we've got this little adjusting screw at the back. So I'm just going to pull my frog back a little bit. And I think that's about right. Okay. Tighten these up. And then let's go back in with my... Okay. Part of me thinks that needs to go back a little bit further. So my frog's just moving freely back. Let's lock everything up again, nice and tight. Okay, go back in with my cap iron and cutting iron. Make sure it's the right way around. And okay, there we go. So you can see the angles off. I would just use my adjusting lever to square that off, or I would readjust how I put it in here. Okay, this doesn't like that. There we go. Okay, so we can see now that our blade's sitting back from the mouth. It's a little bit happier. I'm just going to use my adjusting nut to pull my blade back. And now if I look at that, I think that's not bad. Now I've tried this once and it's cutting off quite thick ribbons. So I'm just loosening my adjusting nut and having a little look to see how things are set, and that's cutting absolutely beautifully. You can see that none of the ribbons are jamming up in there, that all my distances are set correct, and it's cutting beautifully. So that's our smoothing plane. The 4 parts that we need to know as our cap iron, cutting iron, adjusting nut, adjusting lever. Adjusting lever adjusts the angle of the blade. Adjusting nut adjusts the height of the blade. Our cutting iron does the cutting, and our cap iron stops a buildup of ribbons or shavings whenever we're cutting. Okay? So now I'm going to show you how to clean up our end grain using our block plane. Now it's really important that we have our adjusting lever set correct so that the angle of our blade is nice and straight. We have our height set using our adjusting nut. And again, these are visual checks. We do not touch the cutting iron. Now we hold our block plane just as before in our palm, thumb there, fingers there. And we're guiding our block plane at an offset angle along our timber. The reason we do that is to get less resistance, get a nice slicing motion. So I'm just guiding it along. Now as I get towards this end, I'm lifting off because it's likely if I go hard, I will break this end grain and we'll have a split on our timber going out that way. So I can combat that in 2 ways. I can turn and I can work in the opposite direction, or what I can do is put a bit of timber, the same thickness in here, clamped next to it, and I'll guide over both of them so that we're not putting the pressure on here and breaking our end grain. So our block plane can be used for 2 things: adding a chamfer, cleaning up end grain, and making it nice and smooth. The parts we need to know are our cutting iron, cap, adjusting lever, adjusting nut. Our adjusting nut changes the height of the blade, adjusting lever adjusts the angle of the blade, our cap holds everything together, and our cutting iron does the actual cutting. So you can see that over the years, these original frames have been subject to bumps, bad paint jobs, and what happens is that we might get a little bit of material that's blocking our door and stopping our door from closing. So we can use our bullnose plane to get right in tight to the corner, remove the material that will allow our door to close easily, and then what you'll be left with in this top corner is the distance between the cutting iron and the bullnose. You'll have to remove that with a chisel. So we can use our bullnose plane to remove material on the frame, or more commonly on the actual door itself. Next up, we've got these shelves. Now these shelves are not installed by me. If they were, we wouldn't have these gaps and they would sit perfectly even. Unfortunately, they're on a little bit of a slant. So what I'm going to do is get my bullnose plane. I'm going to lift off the shelf until I've got the runner. I can get my bullnose plane in there run it along right to the end, and that will take material off here, trying to even up my shelf so that once again I'll have lovely shelves. This is our rebate plane. It works quite similar to a normal plane by shaving off ribbons of wood, but what's different is we have our depth stop at the side and we've got our fence here. Now for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm using 16mm pine. Now my fence I will set to 16mm, and I want my corner rebate to be half the thickness. So I'm going to set my depth stop to 8. This means that by using this plane, I can create a perfect corner rebate joint on this. So again, I'm using my left hand to push to the side and my right hand to push forward. Now hopefully you can see, I've cut my corner rebate. I've got a slight angle here. That is because I was leaning to the right too much. And I can fix that because I haven't gone down the full depth yet. So I fix that by leaning slightly more to the left. And that should be me. Got a perfect corner rebate. We know that it's cut to the correct depth when the depth stop touches the top surface of the wood. Again, because our weight transfer goes forward, you're more likely to go further down here than here. So just be careful whenever you're doing that. This is our ply plane. Our ply plane is like the rebate plane in that it's got a fence and a depth stop. Now our fence we want to adjust to whatever height our through housing will be. We'll make sure that our chisel is sharp and our depth stop is set to half the thickness of the material if that's what we require, which in this case it is. Again, I'm using my left hand to almost push to the side and my right hand to push forward. And I'm minding my energy transfer as I move forward so that I do not dig deeper at one end than I do at the other. Now, when I cut this time, my blade or my chisel is not cutting anything, so I know I've reached my depth stop and it's time to stop. And I have created a perfect through housing joint. Okay, so here we've got a spokeshave. A spokeshave is almost like a plane. It's got our cutting iron protruding through the heel, and it's got our thumb screws or adjusting nuts to adjust the height and the depth of the cut. It can be used in two ways. It can be used when pulling towards you or pushing away from you. Now sometimes when pushing away from me, I find it might be harder to get a cut. So I could reduce the height of my blade, making the depth of the cut a bit shallower. Or what I can do is offset my angle like I would with a plane, and I'll get a much nicer cut. As I said, you can use it pushing away or pulling towards you. Both times you need to make sure your wood is nice and secure in the desk to minimize vibrations. Our spokeshaves are available in different sizes. On this makeup table, I used a spokeshave to clean the outer edge before I sprayed it.